A 24-hour video surveillance camera witnessed the raid. The time of the break-in also captured in the top corner of the screen. Two men forced their way into a vacant shop through an alleyway door, then went on a rampage through the arcade. 4 shop doors were smashed, food and drink was stolen from a cafe, and its cupboards ransacked, apparently in a search for money. Shop owners are becoming afraid to stay in the building after hours, and many are facing crippling insurance costs to cover frequent damage bills. Shop windows along the Civic block can cost from $400 to $4,000 to replace. Some are smashed within hours of repair.
It's very distressing, and they're running short of patience. I mean, to say the Civic area is targeted as the area of the future, and every time someone tries to do something to improve it, the vandals come around and destroy it on us.
Bob Murray found the door of his business pushed off its rails and hanging by a padlock which withstood the attack. The video captured the intruders randomly striking their targets until they activated an alarmed door and fled. Security guards were on the scene within minutes. The police fingerprint unit collected evidence at the scene and detectives are studying the surveillance camera tape. Andrew Lobb, NBN News.
This is the escort agency which was approved by Council last night. It's discreetly located at the back of this building which fronts Maitland Road at Islington. For the last 18 months, Council has refused applications for escort agencies because of confusion which exists in the law. But according to Councillor Frank Rigby, it's time they took a stand.
At the moment we've got 2 sets of contradicting legislations. The police closing them down and we've got to open them up. What we want is the state government to give us the power to control the brothels in Newcastle.
The approval of the Islington business comes just 2 weeks after police raids on several inner-city brothels, which saw around 20 women charged with prostitution-related offences. The owners of the Islington business have given Council a guarantee it will be a meeting place only. Councillors will inspect the premises in 2 weeks' time.
What we will be able to point out to the aldermen that this, although it is a legitimate escort agency, the escort only goes 20 yards up the street and then they do whatever they're going to do. And we are losing control of the whole situation.
Also to be inspected by councillors, this adult bookshop in Hamilton. The owners last night gained approval for a similar business in New Common Street in the city. There was concern from neighbouring businesses that it would bring an undesirable element into the CBD. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
Four-year-old Carol Ann Milton and her friend 2-year-old Jared James Ting died when flames engulfed the upstairs bedroom of the Milton family flat in November last year. Ambulance officers performed CPR on the children in an attempt to revive them, but they were pronounced dead soon after being taken to the John Hunter Hospital. An investigation was conducted into what caused the fire in the Christo Road flat at Waratah. The inquest began at Newcastle Court today, but was adjourned to allow Jared's mother to gain legal representation. The inquest will resume on the 16th of next month.
3 months on, but the images of the January bushfires which savaged New South Wales remain very vivid memories. For 2 weeks, fire crews were on 24-hour alert. Thousands of properties and forests were devastated and several lives lost. Slowly, the state began to rebuild. Emergency supplies were organised for those left homeless. Now, state government, in response to public demand, has established a select committee on bushfires to review previous parliamentary reports and fully assess the degree of fire damage, the efficiency of firefighting methods employed and funding for bushfire brigades. Member for Waratah John Price is one of 4 MPs to sit on the committee, which is expected to begin its deliberations within the next 2 weeks. The committee will canvass community concerns and develop recommendations to correct any deficiencies in the state's emergency services policies. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
For the first time in Australia, the Moscow Circus has brought out its spectacular Cossack horsemen. In the past, quarantine rules have made it almost impossible to import the ponies, but even with the new rules, the horses have been in a special camp outside Sydney for 5 months, waiting for a clearance. With man and beast reunited, it's a dashing act of skill and bravery.
Very dangerous. Very dangerous. Very dangerous. Every day so very dangerous.
The circus opens its 6-month Australian tour at the Newcastle Entertainment Centre tonight. After a 10-day stay, the show will then tour New South Wales with performances in Tamworth and Port Macquarie in June, Coffs Harbour and Lismore in July. The opening night has been threatened by animal liberationist campaigners. The circus says the protesters are a noisy minority who don't know the facts.
There's no question from our research and the level of business that we do that the majority of Australians want to see animals in circuses, providing the animals are properly looked after, and I can assure you they are in the Moscow Circus.
The troupe has been developing new acts, not the least a graceful leap in the trapeze. But don't get too starry-eyed, there are no positions left to run away with the circus. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
The 11-metre sloop Golden Dolphin sent out of Mayday at 7 p.m. after being rolled and dismasted 30 nautical miles east of Nambucca Heads. The Lismore-based rescue helicopter located the stricken boat but was forced to delay the recovery operation until this morning. The yacht had drifted south to be 30 miles off Smoky Cape by the time its 2 crew members were winched to safety around 7 a.m.
We'd identified it last night as a yacht that had been dismasted. A tanker had been dispatched to rendezvous with it and keep it company for the night. We got out there about 7 o'clock this morning and they had no communication, so we sent a radio down and established then that the 2 people on board wished to be rescued.
58-year-old Albert Foss and his 48-year-old wife Jane were both taken to Coffs Harbour Hospital. They were reported today to be stable.
They were in reasonably good spirits. I think they were both very tired. And I think they were a little disappointed to have to leave the yacht, but they certainly looked comfortable when we got them back to dry land.
The abandoned yacht, worth around $100,000, was last sighted being battered by huge seas off Port Macquarie.
The incident took place in one of the school's science labs on Tuesday. 2 Year 9 students were taking part in a practical lesson when it's alleged one student threw some diluted hydrochloric acid from a test tube into another boy's eyes.
Well, he said that he threw his hands over his eyes and started screaming. He did think he was blinded. He said it was very, very painful.
13-year-old Jason Marsh was taken to hospital for observation but was released soon after.
Later that evening he was experiencing blurred vision and pain in his eyes.
There was very prompt action by the science staff, a very experienced teacher involved who very quickly reacted to it and had the child brought into the preparation room, and an eye wash procedure started which went on for at least 5 minutes.
School principal Ken Terry says the incident was unfortunate. A 13-year-old student has been suspended until further notice. The school says it has strict safety procedures in place, but Debbie Marsh claims the incident could have been worse and believes further action should be taken.
Well, I would like to see the boy charged. Children today, they've got to be taught what's right and what's wrong, and they do know right from wrong.
Melinda Smith, NBN News.
It started off as a quiet ride, but just into the journey, the coach carrying Minister Robert Webster was bailed up. Even a harsh threat from the minister himself did no good. The play acting was the brainchild of the Maitland Tourism Council, which today launched Heritage Week, and what better place to do the honours than historic Morpeth. During his visit, Mr Webster also unveiled 2 new tourist walks. Visitors can now stroll around Morpeth and East Maitland, taking in the history as they go, and there are plans to include other areas as well.
Yes, we're certainly looking at the Maitland area, and it will probably be divided into a number of precincts, and then we'd like to move on to Bulwarra and Lorne, and we have actually applied for a grant.
Heritage Week continues tomorrow in Maitland with Steamfest.
The former nurses' home in Pacific Street has provided accommodation for university students for the past 3 years, but there are moves to close it down. The uni's lease, due to expire in November, will not be renewed, and Newcastle Council says there are fire safety hazards.
The floors need to be fire separated. The primary stairwell needs to be fire separated, basically just closed off, and we need to replace the heat detectors with smoke detectors.
According to the Residents Association, all that's needed are a few changes, but that will cost money the university is not prepared to pay. Students say if they're forced to move out, they won't be the only ones to suffer.
It's good for the town and for us to be here because we estimate about $10,000 a week into the local businesses.
As part of a campaign to save the building, hundreds of protesters will join in a march to Civic Park tomorrow.
I think at the moment the university is under the impression that students don't really like living here. And it's up to us to convince them that we do. And the place is full. We've got 220 students here and they're not leaving, so we want to live here.
Melinda Smith, NBN News.
Have you thought about the animals?
More than 60,000 people are expected to visit the 9th annual Steamfest, with numbers on day one already up on last year. It offers a nostalgic trip back to the days before the XPT. Visitors were given the rare opportunity to compare restored trains, including the historic 3801, to the more modern versions.
It's become a national festival, and this year we've had people from Western Australia asking can they come and ride on the train. So
there is something to impress everyone. Big trains for the more mature visitors and little trains for the first-timers. The highlight of the festival will be tomorrow's race between the 3801 steam train and a Tiger Moth aeroplane. Amanda Bolger, NBN News.
And it's fabulous.
Coal Association boss Richard John was in Newcastle today, home territory for a man who spent his boyhood in Wallsend. He's taken office as the Australian coal industry has just gone through another bruising couple of rounds with powerful Japanese coal buying cartels.
The industry itself is very disappointed that the settlement was less than everybody would have liked, ultimately. I think one also has to remember, however, that the tonnages were maintained even though there was a $2 price drop.
The Mine Workers Union has called its strike in disgust over what it sees as Australian coal being sold too cheaply and the rejection of calls for a moratorium on retrenchments, pending the outcome of a coal industry study.
They will be examining all those aspects of the industry that are concerning the union, that concern us, that concern the producers, that concern international marketing, and we obviously are going to be waiting with great interest as to what the outcomes are and are working on our submissions now.
Richard John says the two main things going for Australian coal on the overseas market is its superior quality and reliability of supply, but he believes that customers are looking elsewhere.
The particular strike on which the union has embarked now, I think, is sending those sorts of the wrong sorts of signals to the Japanese and to our other potential buyers.
Chris and Ian Snedden of Valentine near Newcastle couldn't be happier. They have two wonderful children, John, who's 4.5, and little Emily, born last week. What makes the Snedden family so remarkable is their very brave and determined mum. Chris Snedden has a life-threatening congenital heart disease. Her heart races, which has led to a number of cardiac arrests. To control the problem, Chris has a defibrillator which administers an electric shock whenever her heart rate increases.
I had been delivered with 20 electric shocks from my defibrillator while I was carrying John, and I have a new one since implanted, and I have only received one with this little lady, so...
In having John, Chris surprised the experts. Now she's done it again with Emily.
When she had her first child, that was probably the first patient with one of these defibrillators to actually have a successful pregnancy. And it certainly must be unusual to have two pregnancies with one of these devices in place.
For Chris, it was a case of monitoring and regular checkups with her specialists. And from there, it remarkably led to a rather trouble-free period in hospital here, and the delivery went very smoothly.
Ian and Chris have praised the efforts of staff at John Hunter Hospital, and while they are very thankful for their two children, enough is enough.
This is definitely it. I'm very lucky I have one of each. Pigeon pair now. That's enough. Yeah, I think we can say everybody relax now. That's it.
The police chase ended at Ellamore Vale Public School. Riley abandoned this yellow station wagon in the grounds, fleeing into the bush. Within minutes of spotting the car, more than 20 officers began searching surrounding streets.
Riley, there, blue grey eyes, tattoo.
The pursuit began after an off-duty officer spotted Riley at Ellamore Vale Shopping Centre at around 8:30. He confronted the escapee, who allegedly made threats against the policeman's life. Realising he had to protect shoppers, the officer let Riley go. He was pursued through the suburb, police losing sight of the car until it was found around half an hour later at the school. Despite efforts by a sniffer dog and a dozen police cars, no sign of Riley was found. The 19-year-old was serving time at St Heliers in Muswellbrook for break-and-enter offences and car stealing. He was not due for release until the year 2000. Police confirmed this afternoon they have spoken with Riley over the phone today and, along with his family, have appealed for him to give himself up or at least get in contact with them again. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
3 weeks before Mark Alley was viciously bashed and his body dumped at Spears Point in December 1992, he'd driven to the Central Coast to buy heroin. Jimmy Boyle of Warners Bay told the court he'd driven Mark to a house near the entrance bridge where Mark had bought the drugs from a blonde-haired woman. Asked if he'd recognise her again, Boyle said, "I've told the police all this. They said they knew her. They knew where she's living." Boyle said after the second and last time he drove Mark down there, Mark had told him, "Don't mess with these people. One of them carries a gun." Mark's girlfriend of 5 months, Kim Cherry from Dungog, said their relationship had broken down when Mark resumed taking drugs. She believed he was using heroin about twice a week. She said he also smoked and sold marijuana. Another witness, 23-year-old Jeffrey David Carr, who now lives in Moree, was warned that on leaving the court, he'd be arrested and charged with offences relating to the supply of cannabis and amphetamines. Despite this warning, Carr told the coroner that he too had driven Mark Alley to the Central Coast to buy drugs. Carr said he was left at a bus stop while Mark and another man bought heroin. Jeffrey Carr will appear in court on drug charges on the 9th of May. The inquest will continue tomorrow. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
There's increasing demand on local councils to introduce curbside recycling programs like that operating in Newcastle. Despite the problems Newcastle Council has had with the program, other councils, it seems, are keen to follow. In the coming budget, Cessnock is to allocate $200,000 towards the implementation of a recycling program. Both Maitland and Port Stephens are also committed to the scheme. Instead of calling for individual tenders for the operation, it may be more economical to embark on a joint project.
Well, our very early figures show that the service, a fortnightly service, could be provided at about $25 per customer or $25 per house per year. We suspect that cost could probably be reduced by down to about $15 per customer.
A study is being carried out to determine whether the idea is viable, but it appears at this early stage all three councils are keen on the proposal. The only concern for Port Stephens is the distance the recyclable material would have to be hauled, as Maitland would be the most likely base of the operation. All three councils will make a decision within the next few months.
Hey, there's that little piggy counter. Where'd you go again? Oh, geez, there, now you're over there. There's only 5 seconds left. You better get over here, and oh, I hope you're recording.
The two-pronged attack, launched late yesterday, staggered United Mine Workers officials. The Coal Industry Tribunal, established in 1949, set the mine union apart from any other in dispute mediation, even though the union often chose not to follow its recommendations.
Given the contempt that the union has consistently shown for decisions of the Coal Industry Tribunal, that we should bring the coal industry into the mainstream of industrial relations and bring it under the auspices of the Australian Industrial Relations Commission.
For a Labor Party or a Labor Party minister to come out and say this at this particular time, as I see it, as a knee-jerk reaction to what I see as a just right to strike, is pretty hard to take for a Labor Party.
The federal member for Charlton, Bob Brown, is urging parliamentary colleagues representing mining areas to protest against Mr Brereton's decision, claiming it was made without consulting the Labor Party caucus. The miners say they've been shut out at every level of a campaign calling for higher coal prices and job security. But they didn't leave the negotiation table yesterday without reapplying for a moratorium on job cuts, while a study of the industry and its problems is carried out.
We'll be going back to regroup. As I indicated, the application's in the tribunal. We'll be pursuing that. Now, as matters unfold and how we're being treated along the path, we'll determine what sort of reaction that we need to give to support that application.
But that wouldn't be ruling out strike action in the short term?
That doesn't rule out any sort of industrial action.
This is one image of Port Stephens that won't be found on postcards. Hundreds of rotting sticks and trays left behind by oyster growers who've quit the port. There are 50 derelict sites taking up about 10 square kilometres of the waterway, abandoned decades ago.
They're a drain on the nutrients, they're unsightly, they're not aesthetically acceptable to the boating public and the water users.
The responsibility for removing the thousands of tar-soaked sticks and old turpentine posts now lies with the Fisheries Department, which has engaged an Army landing barge and excavator for the job. Work is being carried out on the old Phillips oyster lease at North Arm Cove.
Unfortunately, these leases were a result of a receivership liquidation of a company, and it's like most businesses that go into receivership, they leave long-lasting legacy.
It's important that the leases are removed. Given the accumulation of oysters in enough time, leases like this could become almost a landmass in their own right. The department is negotiating with the Environment Protection Authority for the ultimate disposal of the timber and is considering imposing a bond on growers. The industry is worth more than $5 million for the port each year. Andrew Lobb, NBN News.
Details of a leaked government report obtained by local member Jeff Hunter have fuelled rumours of moves to ultimately close down Bullaroo's police station. The report outlines plans to transfer the station's 4 officers and replace them with a one-man shopfront facility that would only be open during business hours on weekdays. The possible downgrading is cause for concern for Bullaroo's many senior citizens.
When we need someone in an emergency, to whom do we turn? The police. If they're not here, who are we going to go to?
According to local police, reducing the number of officers will greatly delay the response time when called to a crime, and that has the business community outraged.
If commercial buildings can't afford a guard to secure their premises and be there when there's a break-in, then they've got to wait for the police. In that period of time, quite a lot of damage can be done and a lot of stock removed.
Without a strong police presence, the town says its major concern is the potential for crime. Since nearby Teralba has operated with a one-man station, reports confirm a steady increase in the number of thefts, malicious damages and assaults.
We're going to fight. We're not going to let them just do this without a decent fight to start with.
Melinda Smith, NBN News.